The numbers on the digital clock were sharp, aggressive slivers of red in the velvet darkness of the bedroom. 2:13 in the morning. That there is a specific kind of silence that fills a large house when you are the only one awake. It isn't peaceful. It is heavy, pressing against the eardrums like deep water. I didn't wake up from a nightmare. I didn't wake up because of a noise. I woke up because the temperature in the room had shifted, a subtle drop that registered on my skin before my mind could catch up. I reached out, my hand sliding across the Egyptian cotton sheets. They were cool, smooth. I stretched my arm further, expecting to brush against the warmth of David's shoulder, the solid, reassuring weight of my husband. Nothing. My fingers met only the flat, unwrinkled expanse of the mattress. I sat up, the silk of my nightgown rustling like dry leaves. I pressed my palm against his pillow. It wasn't just empty. It was cold, stone cold. The heat of his body had dissipated hours ago. He hadn't just gotten up to use the bathroom or to fetch a glass of water. He had been gone long enough for the linen to forget him. Panic, irrational and sharp, spiked in my chest. "David," I whispered, my voice sounding thin and fragile in the cavernous master suite. Then, I heard it. A sound so faint it was almost a vibration in the floorboards, rather than a noise in the air. The subterranean rumble of the garage door. But it wasn't the ascending whine of the door opening to welcome someone home. It was the heavy, final thud of the door sealing itself shut. I threw off the covers, ignoring the chill that immediately bit into my bare ankles. I didn't bother with slippers. I ran to the bay window that overlooked the driveway, my breath hitching in my throat. I pulled back the heavy velvet curtain just an inch below. The fog had settled over our cul-de-sac, thick and gray, swallowing the manicured hedges and the street. But cutting through that soupy mist were two twin orbs of red. Taillights. They were fading, moving away from the house, disappearing into the white void of the night. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Where could he possibly be going at this hour? David was a man of routine. He was an architect. He built structures. He respected foundations. He didn't disappear into the fog at 2 in the morning. The questions began to spiral. A chaotic carousel in my mind. Was it a woman? The thought tasted like bile. David was 38, more than 2 decades my junior. People had whispered when we married. They called me a cougar. They called him an opportunist. I had ignored them because I knew her. I thought I knew his heart. But does a 60-year-old woman ever truly feel secure when her husband is young enough to be her son? Or was it something else? Gambling, drugs, a secret life hidden beneath his tailored suits and gentle demeanor. I didn't think. I didn't grab a coat. I didn't change out of my nightgown. I grabbed the keys to my Mercedes from the nightstand, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped them. I flew down the grand staircase, the marble steps icy beneath my bare feet, and burst out into the garage. I took the sedan, not the SUV. It was quieter. I backed out, the engine purring, a low note of complicity, and followed the tire tracks he had left in the morning dew. I drove on instinct and adrenaline. The neighborhood was a ghost town. The houses were dark, silent monoliths of brick and stone, their inhabitants sleeping the sleep of the innocent. I was the only one haunting the roads. I caught a glimpse of his car ahead, a silver flash, turning onto the old mill road. Why go there? That road led away from the city, away from the hotels and the bars. It led nowhere. The streetlights thinned out, replaced by the encroaching shadows of the forest. The fog was thicker here, clinging to the windshield, forcing me to slow down. I killed my headlights, navigating by the moonlight, filtering through the canopy of ancient oaks. I didn't want him to see me. I needed to see him first. He turned left. I held my breath. The iron gates of St. Jude's Hollow loomed out of the mist like the entrance to a forgotten world. The metal was rusted, twisted into shapes that looked like grasping hands. It was a cemetery that had been full for years, a place of crumbling mausoleums and moss-eaten angels. My tires crunched over the gravel, a sound that seemed deafening in the stillness. I pulled off into the grass, hiding my car behind a cluster of weeping willows. The air smelled of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the metallic temps of approaching rain. I opened my door and stepped out. The wet grass instantly soaked through my thin slippers, freezing my toes, but I didn't feel the cold. I only felt the terror. I saw a beam of light cutting through the fog about 50 yards away. A flashlight. I moved silently, creeping from tree to tree, my heart in my throat. I felt like a voyeur in my own life, watching a scene I wasn't meant to witness. It was David. He wasn't meeting a woman. He wasn't buying drugs. He was kneeling. He was on the ground. his expensive suit pants muddied by the wet earth, kneeling before a small weathered headstone near the edge of the woods. The flashlight lay on the grass beside him, casting long, distorted shadows against the trees. He wasn't crying loudly. That would have been easier to witness. Instead, he was heaving. His shoulders shook violently, a silent, rhythmic convulsion that looked physically painful, as if his body was trying to expel a grief too large to contain. He looked broken. He looked like a child. I watched, my hand clamped over my mouth to stifle a gasp, as he reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small object. It glinted in the flashlight beam. A toy car, a vintage metal one, the paint chipped and worn. He placed it gently on top of the headstone, his fingers lingering on the cold granite for a long moment. Then, he stood up. He wiped his face aggressively with his sleeve, composed himself with a terrifying speed, and turned back toward his car. I hid behind the trunk of a massive oak tree, holding my breath until his taillights disappeared back down the gravel road. Only then did I move. I walked toward the grave, my legs feeling like lead. I pulled my phone from my pocket and turned on the flashlight. The beam shook as I directed it at the stone dot. It was a small marker, modest, almost consumed by the moss. I swiped the greenery away with my trembling hand to reveal the inscription carved into the gray stone. Leo Anderson, beloved son, 2016-2020. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The fog swirled around me, suffocating in cold. Anderson. That was our last name. That was David's name. I did the math, staring at the dates until they blurred. 2016 to 2020. The child had died just 1 year before I met David in the art gallery in 2021. He would have been 4 years old. David had told me he had no family. He told me he had never been married, never had children, that he was a blank slate waiting for me to write our future upon. I stared at the toy car, rusting slightly in the damp air. I was sleeping next to a father who mourned a secret son in the dead of night. If he could hide a life, a death, and a child from me for 3 years, what else was buried in this graveyard? I beat him home by 4 minutes. I didn't park the Mercedes in the garage. The engine heat would have betrayed me. I left it on the street, risking a ticket, and sprinted barefoot across the dew-soaked lawn, entering through the side door. I was in bed, covers pulled up to my chin, my breathing shallow and controlled, when I heard the garage door rumble open. Lying there in the dark, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, I staged the scene of a sleeping wife, but my mind was a riot. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heavy, weary. The bedroom door creaked open. I squeezed my eyes shut, feigning the deep, rhythmic breathing of the unconscious. I felt his presence by the bed. He didn't move for a long time. Was he watching me? Did he know? Then, the smell hit me. It wasn't his usual cologne, the sandalwood and bergamot blend I bought him for Christmas. It was the scent of the night. Wet wool ozone, the metallic temps of rain, and beneath it all, the undeniable, cloying odor of cemetery mud. The mattress dipped as he sat to take off his shoes. He leaned over and kissed my forehead. His lips were cold. In the past, that kiss was a comfort. Tonight, it felt like a brand, a Judas kiss. He stood up, undressed in the silence, and slid into bed beside me. He fell asleep instantly, while I lay there, staring into the abyss of the ceiling, sharing a pillow with a stranger. The next morning was an assault of brightness. The kitchen was flooded with sunshine, reflecting off the white marble countertops and the polished copper pans. The air smelled of freshly ground Arabica and sourdough toast, the domestic perfume of a happy life. David was sitting at the island, wearing a crisp white dress shirt, swiping through the news on his tablet. He was humming. It was a mindless, cheerful tune. Something from the radio. The cognitive dissonance made me nauseous. I gripped my coffee mug to steady my hands. How could he be this normal? How could he sit there, buttering toast, when only hours ago, he was heaving with grief over a dead child in a foggy graveyard? "You look tired, darling," he said, looking up. His blue eyes crinkled at the corners, the same eyes I had fallen in love with. "Did the storm keep you up?" "A little," I lied, taking a sip of black coffee. It tasted like ash. "I have a migraine. I think I'll stay home today." "Rest up," he said, standing and kissing my cheek. "I'll see you at 6. The moment the front door clicked shut, the house transformed. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene. I waited until his car left the driveway. Then I began to tear the house apart. I didn't bother with his office. David was too smart to leave evidence where the cleaner might find it. I went straight to the basement. There was a storage room in the back, a windowless cell of a room where we kept holiday decorations and what David called legacy paperwork, boxes from his life before me. The air down there was stale, thick with dust motes dancing in the beam of the singular, naked bulb. I bypassed the Christmas ornaments. I bypassed his college yearbooks. I went to the stack of plastic totes in the corner, labeled in his neat, architectural block lettering. Taxes, 2015-2018, taxes, 2019-2021I. Pulled the 2019 bin down. The plastic snapped loudly as I pried off the lid. Inside, it was a boring, chaotic mess of receipts and bank statements. I dug my hands in, ignoring the paper cuts, tossing aside utility bills and credit card offers. At the very bottom, beneath a folder labeled charitable donations, I felt something soft. It was a blue velvet drawstring bag, the kind used for jewelry. My fingers trembled as I loosened the strings and dumped the contents onto the cold, concrete floor. It wasn't jewelry. First, a hospital bracelet, tiny, plastic, yellowing with age. Leo Anderson, Dobb, the 12th of May 2016. Next, a stack of photographs held together by a rubber band. I snapped the band and fanned them out. The air left my lungs. There was David younger. His hair was longer, his face less lined, but his smile was radiant, a smile I had never seen directed at me. He was holding a blonde toddler, tossing him into the air. The boy was laughing, his head thrown back in pure joy, and there was a woman. She was petite, with dark, messy hair and a kind face. She wasn't beautiful in the way I was trained to be beautiful. She was soft, attainable, real. In one photo, she and David were sandwiching the boy in a hug, their faces pressed together. They looked like a unit. Unbreakable. A memory flashed in my mind, violent and sudden. Our third date. We were walking through Central Park. We passed a playground, and a child fell off a swing, a nasty spill. The kid screamed. David had flinched, a full-body recoil, turning sheet white. He had turned away, unable to look. "I don't think kids are in the cards for me, Martha," he had said later, over wine. "I'm too selfish with my time. I like my freedom too much." I had believed him. I had thought he was being honest about his limitations. I stared at the photo of him holding the boy. He wasn't selfish. He was terrified. He wasn't child-free by choice. He was child-free by casualty. I reached for the last piece of paper in the bag. It was folded into a tight square. I unfolded it, the paper crinkling in the silence of the basement. Certificate of death. Name, Leo Anderson. Date of death, August 14, 2020. Cause of death, accidental. Drowning. Place of death, Lakeview Cabin, Blackwood County. The room spun. I had to brace myself against the shelving unit. Lakeview Cabin. David left every year for a solitary fishing trip. He called it his reset week. He said he went to a lodge in Montana. I need the silence. He had told me just last night, "I'm heading out tomorrow morning." He wasn't going to Montana. He was going to the place where his son died. And if Leo drowned, where was the mother? Why was her name absent from the death certificate's informant line? I looked at the date on the certificate again. August 14th. Tomorrow is August 14th. David was going back to the scene of the crime, and this time, I wasn't going to let him go alone. But as I stared at the cause of death, a chilling question formed in the dark corners of my mind. If it was an accident, why hide it? Unless the drowning wasn't an accident at all. The dining room table was a vast expanse of polished mahogany, a dark, reflective lake in the center of our home. I sat at the head, the position of power, though I felt anything but powerful. The late afternoon sun sliced through the sheer curtains, casting long, geometric shadows across the floor, but it brought no warmth. In the center of the table, sitting on the woven placemat like an unpinned grenade, was the blue velvet bag. It looked small, innocent, a scrap of fabric that contained the wreckage of my marriage. I heard the front door open, the cheerful jingle of keys, the heavy thud of a duffel bag hitting the foyer floor. David was home early. He was packing for his trip, the lie he had fed me for 3 years. "Martha," his voice floated down the hallway, light and airy. "I'm home a bit early. I wanted to check if you'd seen my waterproof gear. I can't find the pipa." He walked into the dining room, a smile already plastered on his face, the easy, charming smile of the man I thought I knew. He was wearing his favorite cashmere sweater, the sleeves pushed up. He stopped. The silence that followed was violent. It sucked the air out of the room. His eyes locked onto the blue velvet bag. I watched the transformation happen in real time, a horrifying alchemy. The color drained from his face, starting at his jaw and washing up to his hairline. leaving him a shade of gray that looked like wet ash. The light in his eyes extinguished. His posture, usually so upright and confident, collapsed inward. He didn't speak. He stared at the bag as if it were a venomous snake coiled to strike. "Don't lie to me, David," I said. My voice was low, steady, vibrating with a rage I hadn't known I possessed. "Who is Leo?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the door, a feral instinct to run flickering in his gaze. He took a step toward the table, his hand reaching out, trembling. "Martha, please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Give that to me. It's not what you think. Don't you dare touch it." I slammed my hand down on the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "It is exactly what I think. I saw the bracelet. I saw the death certificate. I saw you at the grave last night." He flinched as if I had struck him physically. He gripped the back of a dining chair, his knuckles turning white. "You let me believe you didn't want a family." I stood up, the chair scraping harsh and loud against the wood floor. "You let me believe I was the lucky one, finding a younger man who didn't want children. You let me think I was the one who had to suppress my desire because you weren't ready. But you were already a father." "I had to," he shouted. The sudden volume was shocking. Tears spilled from his eyes, hot and fast. "I had to bury him." "You buried a son," I shouted back. "You don't bury the truth from your wife." "I didn't just bury a son, Martha." He collapsed into the chair, putting his head in his hands. The sound that tore from his throat was guttural, raw. "I buried the man who killed him." The room went still. The dust motes dancing in the sunbeams seemed to freeze. "What?" I whispered. He looked up. His face was ravaged, a mask of pure agony. It wasn't just drowning. It wasn't just an accident. He took a breath, a shuddering gasp that rattled in his chest. "We were at the cabin, Lakeview. It was a perfect day. Leo was 4. He was playing on the dock with his toy cars. I was right there. I was 5 feet away." He stared at the velvet bag, his eyes seeing something far away and terrible. "My phone pinged," he said softly. "A work email. A client crisis. Meaningless. Absolutely meaningless." I looked down. I started typing a reply. It took 30 seconds, maybe 40. He looked at me, pleading for a condemnation I was too stunned to give. When I looked up ... The dock was empty. I covered my mouth with my hand. The water was so still, he whispered. There was no splash, no scream, just ... silence. I dove in. I searched for 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. When I found him, he was tangled in the weeds under the pier. He sobbed, a single, sharp sound. The guilt didn't just break my heart, Martha. It detonated my life. My wife left me. She couldn't look at me without seeing the man who let our son die for an email. I lost my friends. I lost my name. I moved here to be a ghost, to bury David the father so I could survive as David the husband. He reached out, his fingers hovering over the velvet bag but not touching it. "I go to the grave at midnight because I don't deserve the sun," he said, his voice hollow. "I don't deserve to mourn in the light like a good father. My grief is toxic, Martha. It destroys everything it touches. I kept it from you because I knew if you looked at me and saw a child killer, I would lose you too, and I couldn't survive losing anyone else." He slumped forward, defeated, a man excavated by his own history. I looked at him. I saw the pain. I saw the tragedy. I saw the broken boy inside the man. But as I looked at the death certificate still peeking out of the bag, my eyes caught the date again, August 14th. "David," I asked, my voice trembling with a new, colder realization. "You're leaving for the cabin tomorrow. It's the anniversary." He didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. "You said you go there to fish," I said, stepping closer, the air in the room turning frigid. "But you don't fish, do you? You go there to remember." I looked at his suitcase in the hall. It wasn't packed with fishing gear. It was light, too light. "David," I whispered, a terrible clarity washing over me. "When you go to that cabin tomorrow, do you plan on coming back?" The question hung in the air between us, suspended in the dust motes that were slowly settling in the fading afternoon light. "Do you plan on coming back?" David didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence was loud enough. It screamed the truth. He wasn't packing for a fishing trip. He was packing for a penance. He was going to that cabin to stare into the water that took his son, and I wasn't sure if he intended to stare until he found peace, or until he joined him. The rage that had been fueling me, the hot, righteous fire of the betrayed wife, suddenly evaporated. It drained out of me so quickly it left me feeling lightheaded. In its place, a heavy, aching pity settled in my chest. I looked at this man, this beautiful, successful, terrified Manand. I didn't see a liar anymore. I didn't see a manipulator who had trapped me into a childless marriage. I saw a man who had been waking up every single morning for 3 years, strapping a boulder of guilt to his back, and trying to climb a mountain while smiling for his wife. He wasn't hiding a secret to hurt me. He was hiding it to protect me from the radioactive fallout of his own shame. I walked around the table. My footsteps were soft on the Persian rug. David flinched. It was a microscopic movement, a tightening of the muscles in his neck, as if he expected a blow. He expected me to scream, to throw the ring at him, to demand a divorce lawyer. He was braced for impact. I didn't strike him. I stepped into his personal space, the scent of his fierce sweat and old grief rising off him. I reached out and pulled his head against my stomach. He stiffened for a second, shocking in his rigidity, before he crumbled. His arms wrapped around my waist, his grip desperate, like a man hanging off the edge of a cliff. I ran my fingers through his hair, feeling the tremors that started in his core and radiated outward. "We're not going fishing tomorrow," I said. My voice was soft, but it possessed the iron resonance of a final verdict. "And you are not going to that cabin." He tried to pull away, to protest, but I held him tighter. "We are going to the cemetery," I whispered into his hair. "We are going in the daylight, and we are going together." The next morning, the world looked entirely different. The fog that had swallowed St. Jude's Hollow on the night of my discovery had vanished, burned away by a brilliant, unyielding August sun. We drove the Mercedes, but this time, I sat in the passenger seat. I watched David's hands on the wheel. They weren't white-knuckled anymore. They were steady, though a quiet tension hummed beneath his skin. When we pulled through the iron gates, the menacing shadows of the oak trees had retreated. The cemetery didn't look like a Gothic nightmare. It looked like a park. The grass was a vibrant, living green, dotted with wildflowers. Birds were singing a complex, cheerful melody that felt jarringly normal for a place of the dead. We walked the gravel path. The crunch of our footsteps wasn't an intrusion this time. It was an announcement. We were here. We were present. We reached the spot under the weeping willow. In the daylight, the small headstone looked less lonely. The toy car David had placed there 2 nights ago was still perched on the granite, gleaming in the sun. David stopped a few feet away. He looked at the stone, then at me, his eyes wide with a vulnerability that broke my heart. He was waiting for me to be repulsed. He was waiting for the judgment. I stepped forward. I didn't look at David. I looked at the inscription. Leo Anderson. I knelt in the grass. I didn't care about the stains on my linen trousers. I reached out and placed my hand on the warm stone, tracing the letters of the name that had been a ghost in my marriage for 3 years. "Hi, Leo," I said. My voice was clear, carrying on the summer breeze. "I'm Martha." I heard David inhale sharply behind me, a sound like a seal breaking. "I'm sorry I'm late," I continued, speaking to the stone as if it were the boy himself. "I didn't know you were here, but I know you now." I paused, feeling the heat of the sun on my neck. "I love your dad very much. He misses you. He misses you every single minute of every single day, and he's been very lonely without you. But he's not going to be lonely anymore." I stood up and turned to David. He wasn't shaking violently like he had been in the dark. He was weeping, but it was a different kind of crying. It was the soft, fluid release of a dam breaking. It was the tears of a man who had been holding his breath for 5 years and had finally been given permission to exhale. He stepped forward and fell into me, and we stood there in the graveyard, surrounded by the dead, finally learning how to live. The drive home was quiet, but the air in the car had changed. The oppressive density that had filled our house, the weight of the unspoken thing, was gone. It was as if we had opened all the windows after a long, stagnant winter. The secret that was rotting the foundation of our marriage had been exposed to the air, and instead of destroying the house, the light was sanitizing it. I looked out the window at the passing suburbs, the manicured lawns, the people walking their dogs. They all looked so simple, so uncomplicated. But I knew better now. I thought I knew everything about the man I married. I knew his coffee order, his favorite movie, the way he sleeps on his left side. But we are all walking graveyards, burying the versions of ourselves we couldn't save. We all carry caskets in our hearts, filled with the people we used to be and the mistakes we can't undo. I didn't unearth the scandal last night. I didn't catch a cheater. I unearthed a son. I reached across the center console and took David's hand. He squeezed back, his grip firm, his palm warm. Finally, David doesn't have to visit him alone. Secrets have a way of surfacing, don't they? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel. I have many more locked away in this library. Waiting for you.